Y'all, welcome. I'm Jeff Milner. I work at the Enterprise Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Thrilled to have this conversation today. I think it is as timely a conversation as we can have. You know, when we pitched the idea, when subsidies run dry, we thought it was possible, but not as imminent, that ACP would not be the only tool we had available to do this work. As it winds down, we hope not permanently, there is still, you know, and the black cloud hanging over this year, how we don't let that be our focus, because there is so much opportunity, so many literal dollars, which we'll talk about, available to do work that will last a generation and keep people online. So the object of the exercise here is really to talk about how we break down these silos between folks working in the digital equity and access space, as my organization does, getting people online, teaching them skills, making that connectivity meaningful, and the infrastructure required to do it. That work can't happen in silos. It has to happen together, and this year of all years is a particular moment when there is opportunity to make sure it doesn't. So just acknowledging that an hour is not enough time for this conversation, but there are 4 incredible experts up on this stage. There are your state broadband offices. There are so many people that you need to start talking to immediately after our hour winds up. And it has been impressed upon me that we really do just have until 11:30, because we're in the lunchroom, so they are going to kick us off. Let me ask our panelists to introduce themselves first, who they are, the organizations they work for, and the communities they serve. And then I'll do a quick follow-up for the local folks on the panel about the models they're using to get people connected. So, Aaron, I'll let you start.
Great. Yeah, I'm Aaron Young, President and co-CEO at Tri-County Rural Electric. So we service 7 counties in the northern central part of Pennsylvania, some of the most rural parts of Pennsylvania. We've started building fiber in 2019. Previous to that, in the 1930s, we ran electric to all the same locations that we're repeating and running fiber to now. So I guess that's a little bit about our project.
Hi, everybody. Crystal Ivy. I definitely know some of you in the room. I am the Technical Assistance Director with NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. It's a very long name. But prior to NTIA, I was the State Broadband Director for the state of Tennessee. I know there are some Tennesseans in the room, woo woo, and up here on the stage. And then I also did a stint at the Knoxville Utilities Board, which is a municipal provider in East Tennessee, helped launch their fiber internet service.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Evan Freeman. I'm the Vice President of Government Community Relations for EPB in Chattanooga, and EPB stands for Electric Power Board. We're a municipal city-owned utility, and about 14 years ago, got into the broadband business and had the first gig to the home service in the country. And today you can get speeds up to 25 gigs if needed. So I'm really excited to be talking to you today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Wilmer-Colin, the Executive Director of Philly Community Wireless, a local nonprofit building community-controlled networks in North Philadelphia, specifically marginalized communities of Kensington, Fair Hill, and Norris Square.
And I want to do just sort of an infrastructure 101 very quickly. And Alex, start with you. But we have represented 3 pretty distinct locally owned and operated models of how to connect folks. So if you don't mind doing both sort of a quick, like, community wireless and also what a WISP is. We have a municipal provider and we've got a cooperative. If y'all don't mind sharing a little bit what that means
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to say, I think partly what led to the formation of Philly Community Wireless is the lack of something like EPB in Philadelphia. We are a grassroots organization that started with the pandemic and the exacerbation of need that it brought on. We work with a local independent service provider, a wireless internet service provider called Philly Whisper. They donate us free bandwidth as well as labor and equipment to build out our network. And what else were you asking?
What it means to be a kind of community wireless provider, like the work you're doing, and what a WISP is actually.
So a WISP is, we use wireless antennas to build out the network across North Philly, and Philly Whisper is also in South Philly. Unlike fiber, we don't use cable. We can get on high sites and find line of sight to neighboring buildings. It's actually quite affordable to build this kind of technology. Speeds are different than with fiber. But there's a lot of ways it allows for the community to take control of the network. So we install on residential units and community organizations throughout the area, leveraging real estate. The other element of a community-controlled network that we really focus on is anyone in the community can come out and volunteer. I've been volunteering on this project for 3 years before I became the executive director. I've personally onboarded over 50 volunteers to contribute, and part of what we want to instill in everyone is that the same way you can go out and volunteer at your soup kitchen or cleaning up the park, you can be part of building a community-owned network in your neighborhood.
So, Aaron, electric cooperative, what does it mean to be a cooperative provider?
Yeah, so there's about 900 electric cooperatives across the country that really serve the rural parts of America. They were really born out of needing electrification to the farms and moved from there. And 200 of those cooperatives have gotten into building out broadband for the same exact reasons, to reach those members that the traditional IOUs didn't want to or didn't have a financial reason to build to. At Tri-County, we've been building, as I mentioned, since about 2019. We've built about 2,800 miles of fiber. So our lead area that we've started was Potter County, Pennsylvania, where it's about 40% senior citizens, and it also is 15 to 20% people in poverty. So when we started out, that was one of the least served counties in the state, and now that is probably one of the most served counties in the state if you look at the Pennsylvania broadband maps. So our cooperatives in general, they're owned by the members. So we have a board of directors that is elected by the members. They set the direction for the cooperative, and the members have a voice in that. And that's really what makes cooperatives, I think, a big key to this puzzle, is that cry from the membership. We're not beholden to shareholders. We're doing it for the greater good of the membership and to meet the needs of the membership.
And Evan, people say muni, what does it mean to be a municipal provider? What is EPB?
Yeah, sure. And so in 2009, we built out a fiber network throughout our community, and it had a couple of benefits. One, on the electric side, just being able to have the smart technology to reduce outages and to be more efficient there, but then also to again provide that gig to the home service to our community. But it's meant a lot for our community. It's gone past just home service and residential service, but really bleeding over to education, economic development, applications, possibilities of telehealth and all the things that our fiber has been able to do, including research on several federal projects with Oak Ridge National Lab. So that having that fiber built in our community and us reinvesting that money back into our community and not necessarily going to shareholders has been really transformational for Chattanooga.
And then, Crystal, first let me say that it's astounding to me that you exist. It's someone who has run a state broadband office, someone who has worked at the ground level, building out a network, and is now with the federal government. But we've heard from 3 different local providers. What is kind of the Fed's role in this? Where is NTIA coming in to?
Yeah, absolutely. So NTIA, we are the federal agency that advises the president on telecommunications issues, and we've been working on broadband for a really long time. And I hate to use the word unprecedented, I feel like it's so overused, but this is really an unprecedented moment. The passage of IJA or IIJA or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has a lot of names. But with the passage of that was really an unprecedented amount of funding that was dedicated to this issue. And I think importantly, what we had traditionally seen in the past was a focus on infrastructure deployment, right? You got to get the infrastructure in place so that it's available to people. And that's still a critical piece of this, but kind of the new thing that we saw in IJA was the Digital Equity Act and the emphasis and focus on not just getting the infrastructure in place, but making sure that people know how to use it. They have the tools and the equipment and the education to use it. So this is really a big moment, not just for NTIA, but for local practitioners who are doing this. And so just the legislation passing alone and the creation of these of the BEAD program, which I'm going to talk about, and the digital equity programs, is causing new entrants to enter the business. It's standing up new nonprofits who now have funding, or existing nonprofits have more funding to do the work that they had been doing in communities for years. So it's sort of taking what was already happening across the country and really just expanded it and made it something that I really think we're going to be able to get this job done.
Awesome. So, here are these locally responsive models. Here are folks getting people connected, responsive to the communities that they serve. On the infrastructure side, every one of the folks up here is also in the digital equity game, is doing that aligned work. Would y'all kind of share, and Aaron, we can start with you and Seniors to Seniors and some of the work that you're doing, but again, where the ISPs, the providers themselves, are the key partner in not just connecting folks, but how they use it and making it meaningful. So if y'all don't mind sharing about your models for digital equity in addition to your connectivity models.
Yeah, so as we started our project, we realized we were bringing a great technology, a needed technology to our members and our community. But we realized we had a large obstacle. As I referenced earlier, we have about a 40% of senior citizens that are our members. And they've never been exposed previously to the internet, or if they had, it was at slow speeds and to check email at the best. Combine that with, we started doing installations in April of 2020. So we had just been hit with a pandemic. Everybody was isolated. Senior citizens were now isolated from their families, had no way to video chat because they didn't understand the technology that they now had available to them. So in combination with the Potter County Education Council, we launched a program called Senior to Senior. We actually, in 2021, I believe, won a FCC Doer Award for the program. The Senior to Senior program really is built on the premise of educating senior citizens on how to use technologies and how to use them safely. So we partnered with area banks, with area healthcare organizations to put on a class for senior citizens that would educate them in telehealth, in how to bank online safely, cybersecurity, and just the basics of using a computer. Many of these people had never even touched a mouse, so training on what a mouse is and how to use it was step one. We needed people to work with these senior citizens to teach them, and we ended up finding a great resource in the local high schools. And so we partnered seniors in high school with these senior citizens and brought them in. And the seniors in high school, I think they learned a lot working with the senior citizens as well. I think it actually went both directions. But the seniors in high school, who have been amazing, sat down with the senior citizens and taught them how to use computers for step one, and then we brought in the healthcare and banking industries to do training after that.
Aaron, thank you. And everyone here is sort of, this panel will slowly reveal all of my biases towards, the ways to do this work. I think often school systems in particular, it's too hard to work with, these bureaucratic, they have a way of doing things, et cetera. And I really want these stories to illustrate how crucial it is, the idea of stay in your lane, throw it out the window. The school system is your vehicle for equity in the community. Your potential, either existing or a local ISP, again, break down that silo, like your vehicle for affecting this work, not just now, but 10 years from now. So, Evan, I'll ask you to talk a little bit about EdConnect. I think Chattanooga is one of those examples. Like Aaron shared, middle of the pandemic, what this work was like. All it took was the world shutting down for us to know how important this was. I think EPB is such an excellent example of when you invest in that infrastructure, that your short-term and long-term solutions can be the same thing. So if you don't mind sharing the EPB story on this.
Yeah, sure thing. And I feel like the pandemic was ancient ages now, but time is moving so fast. But we survived, and we're here. But back at the onset of the pandemic, it became very clear that students needed access and a way to get service. So pretty quickly, we worked with the Enterprise Center and I know UTC to put up just some hot spots across our territory, and community center parking lots, things like that. But that was obviously not a sustainable solution for families that are going to be working from home and also trying to do school from home. And so the next step was the school superintendent meeting with our CEO and organizing a group of community leaders together to talk about how do we address this issue and how do we get these students connected. And so during the conversations, one of the ideas came up. We're trying to figure out how many students don't have access, where do they live, how do we, get this correct list. But somebody threw out, what if we covered every student on free and reduced lunch? And pretty quickly, that bold statement became the mission and the goal. And so in a relatively short time, we were able to partner together, work with the school system, the county, the city, the state of Tennessee, and several of our local foundations to raise money to be able to cover this program. And so what we created was called HCS EdConnect. It is in-home 300 meg service at no cost to every family that qualifies for free and reduced lunch. And today we have about 28,000 students that are benefited from that, about 17,000 households. So it's been a pretty transformational and effective program. But the big thing to that, back to having the infrastructure in place, was that we already had a fiber network built out. And so, you have the infrastructure, but then working together as a community to come up with solutions and identify the problem, I think is the most important part. So, we're preaching to the choir about digital equity, but I think the important piece that, as Crystal said, the unprecedented amounts of money that's flying around, the partnerships and working together as a community to solve solutions is going to be key.
And in Hamilton County, right, we're still experiencing ACP winding down. About 9,000 households that are going to lose that benefit in a few months. But as Evan pointed to, it's about half the households who, in other communities where 100% will lose that access, we're insulating with EdConnect because the infrastructure was there. Alex, I get to spend, just an awesome time yesterday with the team at Philly Community Wireless. Like that's the same story. ACP's going away. Y'all aren't. People are staying connected because of the work you're doing. Do you mind talking a little bit about? And I got to see just how deeply embedded in the neighborhoods that you are. Kind of the digital equity work that goes along with maintaining this wireless network.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to say, we started at the, spring and summer of 2020 when we never really expected substantial government funding to come around. And we received startup funding from the Digital Literacy Alliance here in Philadelphia, and then sustaining funding from the Independence Public Media Foundation. A lot of what has supported us has been community organizations, anchor institutions who both donate staff time from various practitioners as well as their real estate to help build out the network. The kind of embedded nature of our network has enabled us to build a really, street-level mesh. So you have both public and private networks. You can be inside your house and outside and have access to the internet. We try to install in public spaces. We started in Norris Square Park, where there were about 60 tour attendees yesterday, but then we've been growing out to other areas of the city, both in Fair Hill, senior living space called ASE, and then in Kensington, where there's a large unhoused population. We've been installing at rehab units in other areas where we provide public Wi-Fi for people who can't otherwise access it. We're very curious to see what's going to happen in the future. There's 30,000 people currently subscribed to ACP in the areas that we serve. We hope that our services can help cover some of what is lost through this process. But I also hope that the funding coming down the pipeline is going to ensure for more sustainable models that develop beyond just local, often large telecom companies. So for example, Philly Whisper doesn't really participate in ACP. Instead, they support our program. And we would love for more ISPs to allow us to build off of their network, to build community networks sharing Wi-Fi throughout an area.
Awesome. Crystal, if I can ask you, to talk a little bit about kind of Knoxville's mandate when KUP was building out to serve disconnected folks. I think it's such a great example of where the object of the exercise was to reach the most disconnected residents, not just to build where people could pay for it, but then also maybe if there are other, as you spent time around the country, examples of these like combined efforts, digital equity and infrastructure at the same time.
Yeah, I think we are seeing nationally efforts on digital equity and digital inclusion really increase from a variety of types of providers, a variety of sizes, traditional, non-traditional, different types of technology. This is really a big moment for digital equity, as everybody in the room knows. But Jeff asked for an example, so I'll talk a little bit about the Knoxville Utilities Board since I am familiar with that one. And I think it is a good example because it's an example of a new entrant that really prioritized digital equity along with infrastructure build out at the same time. And I think that's not always the case, right? Sometimes it's, okay, let's get the infrastructure in place and then we'll think about digital equity and making sure people know how to use it later. And this utility in Tennessee really said, no, we're going to do this at the same time. We're going to make sure that our community is equipped to use this asset once it's available to them. And so that sort of manifested in a variety of ways. So Jeff mentioned this mandate. So the city council was very adamant that if the utility was going to do this, if they were going to start providing broadband service, that they had to prioritize those areas that were the most lacking, that had historically been left out of investments like this in the past. And so that was something that they did. The first areas that they started building out to were underserved areas, or maybe they were urban areas, but that maybe folks couldn't afford the service, for example. And so that was one piece of this. But then in addition to just where they decided to build their infrastructure first, they also really had to focus on digital equity. So they worked with, just immediately from the get-go, nonprofits in the community that were funding digital equity programming, digital navigators. They worked with the local Chamber of Commerce. Again, trying to make sure that the community knew that this was coming and that they were going to be ready for this. And so they found people, boots on the ground, who were already doing the work in the community. Since they're a new entrant, they're new to this. They found folks who were already doing this, and they decided to support them and work with them. And then, lastly, one thing that I thought was pretty unique for them to do was they had a low-cost service option for customers right out of the gate. So the very first customer that they connected, they immediately had a sort of low-cost service option, a lower service cost service option that was going to be available for eligible households in conjunction with ACP right from the beginning, right? So again, I think that it can be a little bit intimidating for a new entrant, right? You're building all this infrastructure, you're trying to figure out how to pay for it, and so it can be a little bit scary that people are saying, oh, you also need to think about digital equity at the same time. And so I think that they're a good example to showcase that this can be done, and it can be done really well.
That's awesome. Again, it's kind of exciting being the moderator because I can just be wildly biased about things. And this podium is in the way. I don't know if Chris Mitchell is sitting around the corner somewhere, but he would push on this, taking advantage of these sort of once in a lifetime, investment in infrastructure and focus on who it's hard to serve, focus on what the market isn't already going to do, and use these to build true, digitally inclusive infrastructure. And we've got 4 great examples of folks who are doing that and doing it in response to what communities are asking for. I want to talk about partners. We've touched on it, but just for the group, what are the role of kind of and I think for those of us who attend NDIA can feel like, the infrastructure side is not accessible to us. We got to focus on community work. How are y'all working with community-based organizations, folks who aren't in, the infrastructure game, but are helping shape the work you do? And maybe at the end, Crystal, talk a little bit about, with funds that are coming, how NTIA, how states are thinking about those partnerships and supporting those partnerships, not separately once the infrastructure is built, but at the same time. And Alex, we'll start with you and come towards me.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really interesting about Philly Community Wireless is we treat community anchor institutions as infrastructure, right? They own real estate that we can use to build out wireless mesh networks. We work with a wide range of anchor institutions. I work at Temple University Libraries for my day job, and they recognize the importance of this work and the need to pave the digital road to get to the digital collection. We also work with the Free Library of Philadelphia, and then lots of community-based organizations in the neighborhoods where we serve. So we actually have our headquarters inside the North Square Neighborhood Project, which is a local organization supporting youth in the area. We partner with organizations like the North Square Community Alliance, now known as Siente. They own over 25 affordable housing units, as well as a variety of other real estate in the area. And so we often leverage, for example, on the tour, we showed people how we set up wireless antennas on a children's center and then broadcast internet to neighboring houses where people didn't have internet. Many of those people were paying for internet and got off of their paid plans to use our internet. And yeah, the process for us is always about go to a new area, find a community organization on that block or in that zone, start there. Once we get the trust of the community organization and have built out a hotspot or two, the community organizations help us reach out to the neighbors who might be suspicious at first of a kind of free network. And through that process, it kind of is a snowball effect, and we've been rapidly growing over the years, exponential growth in usage and in demand, and it's the kind of model that I think could be replicated not just in this city, but in any dense area of the country, to provide baseline connectivity, ensuring that if people lose other internet connections or are in a part of the city where there isn't otherwise Wi-Fi, they have a way to get to the internet.
And again, on the partnership piece, I think being an internet service provider, and it's very important to partner with folks in the community that are already to the ground and have relationships that we don't have. And so with the HCS EdConnect program, trust is a huge issue. But I think you just touched on it with it's great that you're getting a service at no cost, but what does that mean? Are you it's going to be the bait and switch at some point. So really building that trust and those relationships, and that's with organizations like the Enterprise Center that has relationships with churches and nonprofits to teach digital literacy and to also working with the school system and the teachers to be able to talk with parents about the program being available. And I think that's one part of partnership. Thinking a little bit further ahead, as organizations and companies are taking jobs online or job applications online. digital literacy and connection is a big thing. You can't walk in and do a paper application anymore. And so you hear companies all the time that say, hey, we can't find the workforce. We don't know where the workforce is. Well, the workforce can't use a computer because they don't have access and need help in that area to get good candidates. So I think, thinking through digital literacy and from the service provider perspective, what are the other organizations that we need to be involved with and bring this to their front door and let them know that, here's a workforce that we're missing, here's students that we're missing, and really just work together as a community on that.
And Evan, if I can ask you to, because I think this is, especially for folks who are working with ACP at the moment, the FCC rightly concerned with the idea of bill shock, of what's going to happen as folks lose service. I think EPB is a great example of an organization that doesn't see trust as like a commodity that can be spent. It exists. We have to build on it. We don't get to use it up. And so, as we built out EdConnect, even the way in which folks leave the program, y'all changed a little bit of how you did and how you communicated with folks about that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about even that exit from the program process and making sure that, families don't end up with debt, don't end up with, it wasn't the way it feels like so many other programs, you're just always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I feel like EPB's really addressed that.
Yeah, and it was really important for us and for our partners that, families that are getting on this, if you're a family that has a kindergartner today, officially it was 10 years that this program would go on, but we see this going on in perpetuity. But you could have a senior and about to graduate, and then you have of course other age children in the home that qualify on the program, but that having that consistency where you're not getting a surprise bill, you're not getting stuck with debt after the program. When your student graduates from high school, that you're not left in debt for a program that was designed to help you and it ends up hurting you. So that, again, talking about that trust is very important for us to be transparent and to come up with processes that allow for smooth transition to get off. So if you're a family that has a senior that graduated in May, beginning that next school year, where the school system gives an updated list, and so we go through that, make sure that there's no other school-age children in the home, and our customer service team is really great about working with those families and talking with those families to ensure that they understand that they can stay on if they have more school-age children. But then, if they don't qualify anymore, having a transition and letting them know that, here's an option for you to have our service, and this is the cost of the service, but not just, start charging them and keeping the service going and they're not able to afford it or stay on it.
Aaron, Too Good, EPB serves a wide variety of communities from hyper-urban to pretty rural. Philly Community Wireless, deeply embedded in urban communities. You're working in really rural communities. What does partnership look like for y'all?
Yeah, so I guess we have a different challenge in that. So we have about 5 electric meters per mile that we serve. Electric meters can translate into a chicken coop or a rectifier, so it really boils down to about 3 residential per mile if we're lucky. So that's been a huge challenge, and the partnership areas that we really focus on, in addition to the senior, which I mentioned, is really with the counties and the townships. So with our membership, we were able to get the message out. Our members know who we are, we have trust with our membership, and by May of this year, we'll have construction done to our entire 5,000 square mile on system. So all of our members by the end of the year will have the ability to sign up for our services. So the next phase that we looked at is how can we continue to serve the community? And in order to do that, we really have to look, because of the low density, we have to look at partnerships with the municipalities. And so we've used the county survey data, we've worked with some townships to put surveys out so that we can know the areas that people truly need service, so that we're not just going into an area and overbuilding another provider. So that's really the relationships that we've had, is more of a research so that we are benefiting the community and not overbuilding in an area, and I guess the partnerships for grants to make it financially feasible for us to get to those communities.
Awesome. Crystal, I think from the, this idea that we don't really have an option, BEAD and DA are coming at the same time. Those circles need to be, the Euler diagram needs to look like a circle. Would you talk about how y'all have thought about that, and then advice for community partners in the room around, the infrastructure and meaningful use of that infrastructure dollars coming at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the original question, how are community organizations involved in this work? I mean, community orgs and CAIs are the ones doing the work. You all are the ones that are out there every day facing this and making your communities better. And so, the BEAD and DE programs are some funding and some policies in place to help facilitate the work that you're already doing. So the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, and the digital equity programs, there are multiple ways throughout those programs that CAIs and community organizations can be and have been involved. So on the BEAD side, states are receiving quite a bit of funding to deploy infrastructure out to un- and underserved communities. And that, of course, includes CAIs are in those communities. And that's an eligible use of this funding, is after states have connected their un- and underserved locations, they then can move to connecting CAIs with 1 gig symmetrical service for those that don't have it. In addition to that, the states have to run something called a challenge process. So if you're not from a state, you're not familiar with the challenge process, basically it means that the states are trying to make as accurate a map as possible of the locations that will be eligible for BEAD funding. So they're trying to better determine where the un- and underserved locations are in their state, so they know where to direct this funding. And nonprofits can participate in that challenge process. If you have information, data that can help the state understand where the un- and underserved communities are in your state, that is another way that CAIs have been participating. And some states are already, their challenge processes are already underway. Other states are getting ready to start theirs soon. And so that's one kind of practical example. But then on the digital equity side, states very recently have been turning in their digital equity plans to NTIA. And one requirement within those digital equity plans was something that we called local coordination. But basically it meant that states were required to go out and meet with and get feedback from local governments, community organizations, nonprofits, people in the community that are doing this work, right? So the state is trying to write a plan that says, this is how we're going to facilitate greater digital inclusion in our state. But we didn't want states to just go into a back room and write the plan and then release it and say, this is it, right? We wanted them to work with the people that are doing this work every day. So they were required to conduct local coordination to get feedback and incorporate that feedback into their plans. And then they were required to do a public comment period so that even more people could see the work that had been done and comment on that. And so NTIA is in the process now of reviewing all of those plans. But once they're approved, one good next step for CAIs, nonprofits, would be once their state's digital equity plan is approved and posted on their website, to go look at that plan and to see how you as a community organization fit into that work.
And I'm not going to ask this follow-up question because I've made eye contact with my state broadband office a couple of times during this panel, but I want to talk about, or would love for you to talk about, truly like building those relationships. And this is not, again, it sometimes feels like the policy aspect is so abstract we can't be part of it, or it's a hypothetical. Like, I know what it means to have a relationship with my broadband office, the ways even before these dollars are coming that they're piloting and testing and investing in community-based organizations. Do you mind sharing about developing a relationship with your state broadband office and how that should have happened yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was at the state broadband office in Tennessee, there's so much going on, and it's hard to really be aware of everything that's happening in your state. And so what I would recommend to folks is to, if you don't already know your state broadband office, you don't already have contacts there, make those ASAP. And one good reason for that is, I mentioned that states have turned in their digital equity plans. Many of them have. There's a few remaining, and that we are reviewing and we'll be approving those plans. But the next step after that is that states will apply for the Digital Equity Capacity Program. So they wrote a plan. This is our plan for what we're going to do. And next is the Digital Equity Capacity Program. So how are we going to expand the capacity in our state to execute the plan that we just wrote? And so they are going to be looking to people, again, I sound like a broken record, in the communities in their state that are already doing this work to help execute the plan and the goals and the strategies that they just talked about in their digital equity plans. So now is the perfect opportunity to reach out to your state broadband office if you don't already know them and say, hey, we're a nonprofit in this community and this is the work that we do. How can we help you, state of X, as you're applying for the Digital Equity Capacity Program? How can we help you build out the programming and the other digital equity work that you're going to be doing as a state? So, right, the state doesn't want to reinvent the wheel here. They need you all that are experts in the community to come to them and give them ideas and give them concrete strategies of what they can do.
There's such good examples on this stage and around the country. Look at the cooperative model, membership asking you to get into this game. I saw yesterday, folks walking up in between tours to talk about the work you do. Alex, Evan, EPB, again, invested from a power provider side in the network and realized the community benefit and has continued to respond to community needs with it. We've talked about existing partnerships. Let's look to the future. Let's look to these dollars that are coming, or, Alex, in your case, one step removed from folks who might be able to benefit from those, but deeply embedded in the communities. What do you need from community partners? What do you need from community organizations? How are ways that you want to build on partnerships, continue partnerships, help all of the practitioners in the room understand the opportunity to work with providers to do this meaningful connectivity work and not just infrastructure build out? Aaron, let me start with you.
Yeah, I think from both the ongoing education aspect, it's kind of working with those institutions to let the community know that we are there and that we're all looking for the same solution. We may not be the best provider in an area to most cost effectively reach part of an area, somebody else may be. And I think it's going to be down to the counties and the municipalities to help balance that. We're certainly going to take into account what parts of the communities we can get to with those partnerships, but we need to all kind of come to the table and have that discussion. An ISP or a cooperative, they really can't lead the charge in that discussion, because from what we've seen, the other parties may not come to the discussion. If the county brings all the providers into a discussion and says, these are the areas we need to serve, how are we going to do it? I think that's going to be the most effective way to move that forward. So.
And I think just from, again, what Crystal was saying, you're knowing your state broadband office, and on the flip side of that, they knowing you and all the things that you're doing. And so from the ISP perspective, us continuously being a part of the community, in the community, and learning what organizations need. And I have a bias on the government relations side, but when I did work on the government side, I would always tell folks, don't assume anybody knows your story. Don't assume that anybody knows what your organization's doing. So like, no one knows until you tell your story. So I encourage you to go, whatever providers you have in your community and your elected officials and all the above would be, building those relationships and going out there and really trying to figure out how to pull this together. Again, with the money that's coming down and the needs of digital equity is going to be bigger than ever. So I think there's great opportunity for that, but just constantly trying to find those partnerships and telling your story, and just particularly to those internet service providers.
Alex?
Yeah, it's interesting in Philadelphia that I think there's a lot of pessimism that we won't receive BEAD funding, and that is because we've been identified as underserved and not unserved, which has led, I think, us at Philly Community Wireless to try to really build those bonds with city partners, and that means both Juliet Fink Yates and everyone in the Digital Literacy Alliance, who we hope will find ways to percolate support to us, but also the anchor institutions like the universities that can act as a kind of, the administrative overhead and provide some of the support that we would need to build out a community network. Same with the Free Library and other institutions in the area. But I don't know, there's a lot that we have kind of to remain to see. The digital equity funds coming seem more likely to support causes like ours, and building out that kind of network of anchor institutions that recognize the need for a project like ours, an organization, to build out community networks that can then allow them to do their work. So in particular, we work with the Temple University's Digital Equity Center. Now PCs for People have set up shop here. And what we're striving to do is build out a community network that serves as an umbrella for a larger suite of digital equity services. So the Digital Equity Center at Temple recognizes if they're trying to work in their own backyard, but they can't provide internet to the clients in that area, it's not very helpful to provide them with computers. We also try to partner with other nonprofit organizations like Holobiont Lab is an organization here that builds out solar for communities, and so we go to a garden space, we install Wi-Fi, but then we also try to ensure they have electricity. We install Purple Air monitors, various other services that help, build up a kind of smart garden space that community members can share. And I think to some extent the vision that we have is one where nonprofits and for-profit organizations can partner together to ensure that even if the government can't provide everything we need, that we can. And I hope that Philly Whisper, who has been so generous to us, offers a model to other ISPs that they too can afford to share their internet with people who need it.
And Crystal, I know you have already spoken about this, but I'll give you the microphone again. Like, these aren't nice to haves. What is it that y'all are looking for to make sure happens with these dollars, like in these partnerships? How are the folks who are sitting out here involved in it?
Absolutely. So, when you think about the BEAD program and, the $40+ billion that has been appropriated for BEAD, infrastructure deployment tends to come to mind first, right? You think about wires and cables being installed all across the country, but the E in BEAD is equity, right? And so the importance of embedding equity for these state broadband offices in their BEAD work is in the name, right? And not only in the name, but NTIA required that as states were writing their BEAD plans and their digital equity plans, that they were a cohesive plan, that they talked to each other, that they made sense to work together. Because this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So we got to get this right this time, right? So this was really about working with states who are doing phenomenal work. I might be a little biased on that statement, but they're doing phenomenal work, but they need your help, right? You're even closer to the community and the local level. You know what's needed in your community, and it's not just funding. It's policy changes and other efforts that are needed. And so they are going to rely on you to tell them them what's going to work best. And so, yes, we're giving states a great deal of funding for both infrastructure deployment and for digital equity. Later on, there will be funding available for more than just states for digital equity as well. That's also coming. But at the end of the day, forming a relationship with your state broadband office is really what we want to come out of this. And many of you already know them and are already working with them, but if you don't, now is really the time to do it, because they are going to be reaching out. They're going to be needing you to help them understand what is really the most effective strategy in your community, in your local area, in your rural area to help get folks connected.
Awesome. Well, like I said, I think I could have a 3-day conference that's just this conversation. We've got a couple minutes. I know Aaron, Pamela are around. There are microphones. Folks, what questions do you have?
Is it lunchtime? Is that why?
Is it? Yes. Normally I'm in the role of like being between people and happy hour. Like lunch is slightly less pressing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for everything you shared, all your wisdom. And I'm really glad that folks from Tennessee are here, because y'all have been doing really innovative work at the state. With that said, we're in Pennsylvania, and here we have limits, legislative limits as to municipal broadband. And I'm wondering what kind of advice you have to us in Pennsylvania trying to expand what digital equity means at the infrastructure level.
Sure. I don't know how open I can be about that. I'm kidding. No, I think each state's different, and we in Tennessee we have restrictions, like we can't serve outside of our electric footprint. We can only, if we serve you electricity, we can serve you broadband. But I think the important part is the advocacy and building a relationship with your elected official. And it's easy to make assumptions on why the rules are the rules, but a lot of the times, they just haven't heard enough folks bring it up as an issue. I doubt that, but I just encourage you to go to your state legislature and talk to your local governments and make that make it an issue, because it's not for everybody. It's not for every community, but I think the communities that make the decision and it works best for them, they should have that option. And so since we have $45 billion in federal funding going around, I think from the aspect of all hands on deck, I think muni broadband is just another tool in the toolbox that works in certain situations.
And I will just build on that idea of we are such an example of like there are things in place that make this work harder than it needs to be, but because our provider, potential provider, community partners, our elected, like we do this arm in arm and figure out a way through those hurdles rather than let them be a reason to say no. And so there are, Alex is and Philly Community Wireless is an example of like something you can do after lunch to get people connected. And Evan is an incredible example of what happens when that isn't your only stop on this journey. And again, there are dollars associated with getting it right, and a reason to get people around the table who might not usually want to sit around that table.
Is it me? Okay. Hello, I'm Sean Glaze. I'm with Black Brilliance Research. We have a community network out of Seattle and Tacoma. And we are also one of the recipients of the NTIA's Connecting Minority Communities pilot program. And we'll be training over 100 community members on how to build and maintain internet infrastructure, among other things. So this is of strong interest to me. One of the things that I think a lot about is our federal government will likely be investing in workforce development for quite some time. And so for us, we've been thinking about how what we do is essentially supporting workforce development goals and getting more plugged into understanding like WIOA funding, federal funding, that's for workforce development, and understanding a little bit more about, what will be invested in terms of business and workforce. I'm curious if y'all can speak to that a little bit, because when I think about $40 billion, I think about a blink of an eye, and in the span of time that it takes to spend it, there needs to be a social infrastructure to keep it going. So I wonder if y'all can speak to that.
I can go first, and then I'll let other folks go. So absolutely, we really didn't talk about workforce at all up here with this funding, but it is a critical part of this, right? You can't deploy $40+ billion of infrastructure if you don't have the people and the workforce in place to do that, right? And it's not just splicers and folks that are doing the construction, but it's also people in the community doing the digital equity work as well. And so one eligible expense of the BEAD funding for states after they've connected their un- and underserved locations or have a plan to do so is to also have a plan to bolster workforce development within their state related to this effort, right? So I was talking about that BEAD plan earlier and talking about how states had to write a plan to talk about how they were going to connect every household in their state to high-speed internet. One important part of that plan was they had to write a workforce development plan as well within that. And so they had to talk about what community partners they were going to be working with. Several states are working with community colleges and universities on increasing the skill set of the citizens within their state to help do this, right? This is a mammoth effort across the country. And it's something that I think that state broadband offices are well aware of as well, right? So not only is there funding for this, but this is another opportunity for state broadband offices to work with their internet providers in their state, right? The providers know better than anyone the types of positions that they're going to need, the type of workforce and skills that they're going to need. So this is another opportunity for providers in the room, for local governments in the room that are doing this work to reach out to your state broadband office and help give them ideas on this piece as well. I think that's an important component.
Good. One more question.
Great. Hi, I'm Jackie Braden. I work for a Rural Alaska Community Action Program, and though we are a rural Alaska CAP, we are Alaska's only CAP, so that's fun. And I work in the infrastructure space, ensuring access and affordability. And so my question is, our context, rurally, we can't talk about that, it's not relevant here, it's too much. But Anchorage is like a somewhat big urban city, a lot of urban city challenges. And pretty much everybody in Anchorage has one ISP that serves them, and they're charging a ton for internet. And so there's a huge push for diversity and huge from our consumers. They want choice. And so my question is, if you're in that spot where you have entrenched monopoly ISPs who have no interest in changing the status quo, what is that first step you take toward building out choice for low-income folks within the potential urban or typical U.S. area?
I'll jump.
Do I need to answer this one? That's a fun.
I think a good first step, it again go back to your community coming together, identify this as a big need, and then talking to your elected officials about addressing that need. And unfortunately, there are some incumbent providers that are not fulfilling and overpricing, and so having another option really changes the game. But I think that's where, for us, being a community broadband provider has been successful for our community, because we have very urban area in Chattanooga, but we extend out 600 square miles, so we have some very rural areas. And so it makes a lot of sense for us to cover that territory, because it's not financially feasible for other ISPs to do it. But I think, just getting the elected officials involved and having an honest conversation of, financially it might not make sense for these companies to do it, but this is an option, so why not use the tool in the toolbox to serve the community?
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think you should look at models in other cities for community networks. So we've learned a lot from organizations like New York City Mesh, MetaMesh in Pittsburgh, which has built off their network with collaboration with the University of Pittsburgh. Here in Philly, in Comcast's own backyard, it was only 10 to 15 years ago that Philly Whisper started building an alternative, right? So those are options. Going back to the other question from Seattle, I did just want to say, I think, and this connects in a way, is that it's important that digital literacy be more than just teaching people how to use the network, right? That adoption should be learning how a network works, how you can contribute to its growth, how you can share with your neighbors, and when you become invested in that way in the network, that's what builds out sustainability and the kind of social infrastructure that ensures 20 years from now, we still have the kind of equitable internet that we want.
Yes. I know we're at time. I want to, from a completely unrelated article I read on the way here, just this definition of community that I love, and I think every entity up here espouses and lives and breathes. I think the community is coming together and saying, I'm vulnerable, just like you are. I'm trying. I'm not going to leave you alone. This share, we know the challenges, but when your provider, when the folks that you are working with are part of that community, it's a shared vulnerability. It's some things that can happen overnight, some things that take time, but it's doing it together. So y'all, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience and NDIA for letting us have this conversation. Please come talk to these experts immediately after this, or get lunch and then let them get lunch and then bombard them with questions. Thank y'all.
Thank you.